Good evening. We're here. I'm just checking to make sure my headphones are connected, and they are. So, it is the 49th week. Also, YouTube seems to have changed its live screen here, so this is I'm thrown off a little bit. Anyway, the view has changed a little bit. That's all there is to it. Yeah, week 49. We have a big one, the biggest one that we've had in a while, partly due to the fact that I kind of rolled through a bunch of releases that I had listened to in the second half of November that I just didn't get around to talking about then. And then there were also just a bunch of EPs. We'll talk about that in a second. But obviously, in addition to that, I don't know if it was because of Slava KPSS or if it was because of Husky, but the video after the live stream last week, but over the last week, the stream garnered over 1,000 views, which is incredibly abnormal for the music streams, let's be real. And yeah, I got not a lot, but I got some comments asking me to take a look at some older albums. So I'm going to be doing that as well this evening. There are 3 of them that we will be talking about, 3 sort of like audience requests, album-wise, that we're going to be talking about at the very end of the stream. So you're going to have to hold off for that one. But yeah, we have, aside from those 3, we have 18 releases to get through this week. So a grand total of 21. So it's going to be a long one. We are going to be starting out with rock and metal. We're going to moving on to pop and indie. Then we'll hit electronica. And we will finish up with rap and hip hop again this week. Well, and then obviously the other one. And before we get started, I do have my coffee over here. I have everything more or less open on my laptop. The one thing I do want to do here at the very beginning, though, is I have a little bit of a splasharoo here, mainly because today, as far as I know, I hope all is good. I finally got all of my documentation with regards to taxes and all of that fun stuff done for this year, at any rate. And I won't have to, hopefully, be visiting any more bureaucratic offices until, I don't know. I think I have to get an insurance policy, but that's in January. So anyway, that doesn't count. I'm basically done with the bureaucratic nonsense for the rest of the year, so. A little Cedar Ridge, if anyone's interested. But, yes, kind of get the whistle wetted, and we will jump right on over to the music. As always, if the sound is off or something's not quite right, just put a message in the chat. I will see it. But we are going to be starting, and I do want to, before we jump over to the music, one last thing I do want to say is that this week we're going to be seeing quite a few names. So if you've been watching the streams or you've been kind of following Russian music over this year, there are going to be a number of EPs from artists that released full-length albums in like the first half of the year who are having a bit of a follow-up here before 2025 is all said and done. Anyway, let me click us over. And yeah, so we are going to be starting, and this is actually one of those groups. This is the group Ходьба, yeah. I'm so bad with the udarение when it gets to Russian, but Ходьба. And it's a single, but it's 11 minutes. I'm calling it an EP because I feel like that's basically what it is. This is from late November. This is the EP ЛБ ЮВ. It is a misspelling of the word любовь, which is love. As you can kind of see, this cross-eyed gent in the album artwork. This figure does seem to be their mascot of sorts. Again, just an older crew of rockers. It's got that later Iggy Pop, or sort of more modern Iggy Pop sound. Queens of the Stone Age, stoner desert rock in there as well. Sort of pissed off at the world, pissed off at the system. Just fuzzy, spiky rock. Should appeal to all ages. I don't know, is the volume okay? Let me know if the volume is okay. There's probably another group that better describes it than Iggy Pop / Queens of the Stone Age, but I don't know. I can't triangulate the sound exactly, and those two references I think work well enough in my mind. So, and I feel like they're pretty well known, at least for most people. Thanks, Brett. So, that one's a little bit more laid back. This is one, like, this is where the Queens of the Stone Age energy was coming from. You get the idea. Like I said, this is an EP from a group that released an album, I don't know, maybe back in the summertime. I cannot recall for the life of me. But yeah, it's like I said, somewhere between Iggy Pop, Queens of the Stone Age. You might have another reference to throw in there, but really fun, just energetic, fuzzy but kind of spiky EP, as I was saying. That is the group Ходьба, and the EP is ЮВ. I don't know, ЛБ ЮВ. Anyway, the links to the albums are down below too. So moving on, we have got the EP В детстве, солнце, ярче by the group Енисей. Енисей is the name of one of the rivers in Siberia, and the EP again they called a single. I'm going to go with an EP because we got at least 3 tracks. That's kind of my own personal head canon when it comes to breaking these down. В детстве, солнце, ярче is in childhood the sun is brighter. So kind of now, obviously the album artwork feels kind of maybe sort of black metal, but I remember when this group's self-titled debut EP came out last year. It's a lot. Self-titled debut EP came out last year. There was a ton of chatter about it, but last year when it came to Russian music, I hadn't really figured out a system, so I got super backlogged. Instead of just kind of trying to keep moving along from week to week, I was too stubborn, and I was like, I'll try to get through all of the music in a month, which is insane. I have learned that lesson. But long story short, I did not get around to their self-titled debut EP, which is kind of too bad because this EP I did enjoy. It's a dizzying mix of a concoction of sorts of emo, screamo, Midwest emo, and the blast beats out of black metal. You'll hear it in a second. It's basically just very, very pissed off Midwest emo, but it's kind of good. There's something to it, and I do hope we will get a full length out of them maybe next year. Right, we kind of got that emo-y, Midwest emo-y sound. the blast beats. Got a little bit of the black metal thing going on. But then right? I love that transition. And just the way it works. It's one of those things that on paper feels like it shouldn't work. And if I was just like, as I just described, screamo, Midwest emo, and black metal, like, what is that? But there's something to it. Like, it's not perfect by a long mile, don't get me wrong, but there is something here. It's one of this is their second EP, and it feels like something is coalescing here. So, like I said, I do hope that we'll get a full length next year, something where the sound is just a bit more refined, but all of the pieces are on the table, and you can hear it in this EP. Yeah, like when the blast beats come in, it doesn't feel out of place. And there's this screamo energy, so yeah, obviously not for everyone. That's typically what tends to be the case in the rock and metal category. But I do think it is an interesting mix of sounds, and I am glad I did get around to listening to their sort of second offering here this year. So that is the, as I'm calling it, EP в детстве, солнце, ярче, and the group is Енисей. And the final release in the rock and metal category, a very short one this week, but we've had a few weeks where there haven't been any, so I guess be thankful for what we have, is the album Разумное, громкое, вечное, or Разумное is rational, loud, eternal, I guess is how, I don't know exactly how they would, there's a few ways you could translate it, but, and the group is MOR, more, I'm assuming is what they're going with it. We got the sort of very, in what was just sort of a classic at this point in time for Vkontakte music groups, and their press releases for various albums, speaking volumes to the fact that the people who are writing the press releases don't actually consume the music that they are advertising. Every single one I saw with this album had, quote, the soul of hardcore punk, the danger of metal. What the fuck does that even mean? The danger of metal and the directness of old school hip hop, which sounds idiotic. That is a horrible press release. If the band wrote that and you guys are hearing this, please don't write shit like that. That sounds dumb. It's not what a real person would say. It sounds like you've not listened to the music too. That is the exact phrasing too, right? Just for sure. I saw that so many times. Every time this album was talked about, that was what I saw, that exact phrasing, in Russian, obviously. And while the sounds mentioned there, right, hardcore punk, dangerous metal, or okay, whatever, and old school hip hop, you can hear that on the tracks on this release. I would say that this spiritually has more in common with the harder alt rock sound of the 2000s. The groups that weren't quite new metal, but shared enough of new metal DNA that they often got lumped into the same genres and festival lineups. I wasn't the biggest fan of that sound back then. I'm just gonna throw out the Godsmack. This doesn't sound exactly like Godsmack, but it has Godsmack energy, right? And like, I never disliked Godsmack. I kind of enjoyed Godsmack. And as I've grown older, I understand the appeal of groups like Godsmack. So I get the sound more. I understand what it's going for, and it does feel like that's just the sound of this group. It's not like a cash grab type thing. They're just doing it because this is their sound. This is, I would say, a heavy album for people who typically don't like metal and whatnot. And, you know, For those who do prefer harder sounds, then there's enough of that laced throughout the tracks on this album that you're also going to find something that you can kind of get into. I'm going to just start with one of them that I don't have favorited, because I do feel like this is one that just screamed Godsmack to me. This was the song that this is why I keep saying Godsmack. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. This feels like a Godsmack bass line, and it's like the weird wah, 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 wah. Just waiting for Sully to come in. Oh, yeah. But here we have that kind of borderline rap thing going on. We get to the choruses where... Wait, where's... Right, like, remember when they were using Godsmack in, like, the U.S. Army commercials after 9/11 and all of that stuff? When, like, the tanks were rolling through the desert? This is like that music, which is... This is early 2000s Call of Duty, 12-inch pizza and a Mountain Dew type music, right? But that's okay. Those were simpler times. We all kind of miss them. So here's that faster, right? Got a little bit more of the like borderline thrash sound or death metal sound, if you will. Like I said, if you're looking for something a little bit harder, it's here. But the choruses do tend to be kind of clean, and the vocals in general are quite clean. So even if it's got the speed and aggression, it never goes too overtly into it. All right, I'm gonna hit like 2 other tracks that I feel it. This is that early 2000s alt rock, vaguely new metal sound that, yeah. Got like the chain gang vocals. You can just imagine too the music video that this would have had on MTV with like the shaky camera, like basically any old Limp Bizkit video. I think this is the last one I wanted to, yeah. So, like, I get why they go with, like, the hardcore punk sound, but and I feel like if you listen to rock or metal, you can probably identify those sounds as well, as you've heard a few tracks now. Is it the soul of hardcore punk, the danger of metal, and the directness of old school hip-hop? I mean, this even has a little bit of Lamb of God thrown in there, right? The sort of like new wave of American metal. So yeah, I don't know. That's just, I don't know. That's just the Godsmack sound. I don't, like, there's got to be a better term for that. And it's maybe one of those things that there's been so much focus in the last few years for sure about the new metal phenomenon of 20 some years ago. But I feel like those groups like Godsmack that were on the periphery and we're kind of doing that, but also doing the alt rock thing. I feel like there needs to be an investigation into that too, because I don't know if that was a byproduct of the scene or was just an extension of rock music in the post-grunge era. But anyway, that's what this is. And you know what? That's fine. There's something to it. And I actually had a lot of fun with this album, which, again, is not necessarily something I would have expected if it had been described to me as, like, kind of kind of reminding me of Godsmack. So that is the album Разумное, громкое, вечное, and the group is MOR, M-O-R. Okay, we're done with rock and metal. We move on to pop and indie, and we are getting into, there's going to be a lot of EPs here. I'm just going to sort of, three. Okay, there's just three. We actually have a lot of albums in pop and indie, a lot of releases. But we'll come back to this. There's some more to be said about it. The first one is another EP from a group who released an album in the first quarter. That was one of, when I did my whole little review of the first quarter, it was like an honorable mention. The group is Хватит, паясничать. And the EP here is Рабочее, название, or working title. Хватит, паясничать is kind of like quit whining, but slightly different. It's got that energy. Musically, this is more of the same that the group had on their first album, which also is really fun. Just upbeat, kind of indie dance rock, but the lyrics. There is a very strong sense of irony in the lyrics, and it makes the tracks funny, but not funny in the way of like a joke album funny, in the way of, this is not going to be the best comparison, but you know how like Weird Al tracks are funny, not because they make references to certain things in culture at a given time, but they just are riffing on things in culture in general, if that kind of makes sense. It's funny in the same way that like The Simpsons, older episodes of The Simpsons are funny because they're kind of timeless, but South Park is very much connected to a specific era, the year and the month that it came out effectively, right? These lyrics have more of the timeless quality. Kind of a weird pop culture analogy, but hopefully it works. Yeah, I don't know. And even if you don't get the lyrics, the music is just fun. And I hope it will play here in a second. Jump ahead.
Работа перестала быть бременем. Честные люди меня смешат после сна.
Just a little bit.
Теперь жизненный урок, потому как от преддверии мне теперь не страшно время, но кто бы мне сказал, что я ничего не мог. Раньше я бы не поверил, я бы даже не поверил, но каждый новый шаг теперь жизненный урок, потому. Вдруг узнал, что никому не нужно больше мое мнение. Открыл глаза, я будто видел кошмар всю неделю, и пришла пора забыть проблемы до встречи в понедельник. Понял за обедом, будто кружится планета без меня. Но задача непроста. Я куплю билеты и проеду вокруг света за 2 дня, лишь бы завтра не проспать. Понял за обедом, будто кружится планета без меня.
You get the idea. I mean, you heard a little bit of the first track, you heard a little bit of the last track. There's only 3 of them, so there's not too much else that is left on. But it's just a pleasant, nice, bouncy, dancey little thing. Kind of feels like a sound that was probably more popular around 2010. That kind of indie dance, but like with the electronic elements in it. So that's all right. I kind of enjoyed it back then, and it's nice to run into those sounds as well. So that is the EP Рабочее, название, and the group is Хватит, паясничать. This is actually another November release as well, so there's quite a few of them. It's not really important, obviously, but still. Now this one is kind of an interesting one, and I don't know. This is one of those artists that I was hesitant to listen to. This is Vanya Dmytrienko, and the EP is эмоции, последствия, or emotions and consequences. Now, Vanya Dmytrienko here is Yandex Music's Artist of the Year. I have seen this young man's face plastered on plenty of billboards for various festivals and concerts around Moscow. He kind of seems to be the new face, the new thing of the sort of Russian pop scene here. He gets labeled as a Zoomer artist, so like, I don't know, fuck that. I hate that. That's dumb as shit. He's just a young artist. It's a very short EP, right? It's 3 tracks. It's like 9 minutes long. It is hard for me to give a fair assessment of him on the whole, but I will say, just based on these 3 tracks, there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing mind-blowing about them. But if this is the direction that mainstream pop in Russia is moving here, I'm okay with it. Like, there's nothing... I would rather mainstream pop go in this direction than, like, fucking Ходьба, right? And those of you who know... Really? Okay. Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, ASTHMA boys. And we're actually going to be talking about ASTHMA boys. The Swimmers down there says, until the group... Because, and this is actually one of the things that caught my eye, too. I love Saluki. I loved his album, A Wild East, which was 2 years ago at this point in time. And I still, like, pretty much everything he does, I have a good time with. So Saluki's here. And then ASTHMA boys, which is another group we're going to be talking about here relatively soon. Also, Swimmers is saying that until ASTHMA boys featured with Vanya Dmytrienko on Yandex Music, they had about 50,000 listens, and now they have 50,000 listeners a month, or listens a month, and now they have over 500,000 a month. So Vanya is a powerhouse, and that's okay, right? I like I said, I would rather have pop music move in this direction than, like I was saying, like Hoodie by or like ARTEM and ASTHMA, like just artists who are kind of played out at this point in time and probably need to disappear along with like Dolin and the like, right? Like, who are not that old, but it's time for them to bounce. So I'm just going to jump into so you get an idea. Like, I understand Saluki on the track probably means he had his hand potentially in the track as well. Kind of feels like it at times. But that's bendy. Like, those types of effects and the way things are dialed back a little bit, like, it's not bad. It's enjoyable. I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit though. And if I'm not mistaken, the goofy vocals are Saluki, so... It's not necessarily a new sound. In fact, I would say that this is stuff I remember from like 2010. But I liked it back then. I guess it's kind of catchy. I get why it's popular. I want to jump over to the track with ASTHMA boys as well too, because I swear to God, I have heard this bass line. Fisher Spooner, Emerge. I'm sure it has existed before then. But every time I've heard this bass line this year, I don't know, I love Emerge by Fisher Spooner as a track. It is like, it was one of those music moments in my life that blew my mind. So every time I hear it, I'm just like, yes. I don't know. So yeah, right? Like, it's kind of good. I know he has. I looked at his sort of discography. It's mostly singles. I think he had an album last year or 2 years ago, and then he did a soundtrack. I don't know. Soundtracks are always kind of an oddball thing to put into the discography, especially at an early stage, I feel like, but who knows. So I don't know what to compare this to, but this is a big star. This is this is Artist of the Year, according to Yandex Music, which I will take because Vkontakte, the shithole that is Vkontakte Music, has Makan as Artist of the Year. And Makan can go suck a dick wherever he's stationed in Podmoskovia, because that fucking blows. Makan's album, god-awful. Just soulless garbage. This, there's something to it. I'm not going to say it's the best thing I've ever heard, but I get it. I get why people like it. And I would much rather give Artist of the Year to this artist than Makan. So this is the EP. And for those of us who are just experiencing, I think this is a pretty good place to start. This is the EP Emotsi, Последствия, and the artist is Vanya Dmitrienko. Okay. Moving on, we have another artist who we talked about earlier in the year, I think back in the spring. This is Glukoza, and this is her EP Echoes. Now, Glukoza is another one. I talked about this in the spring, but she used to be this really kid-friendly sort of child music star. This was a while ago. I mean, like, I vaguely remember when she was doing this. I wasn't really paying much attention to that type of music at the time, but I do remember her. And she's now transformed herself into like a Billie Eilish, Arca, Lady Gaga, Marilyn Manson type figure with the vibes and the look. But yeah, musically, this is the same as last time. It's probably not the most cutting edge. It still sounds fine in 2025. It feels like this is the sound of artists from maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, give or take. So it feels like she's slightly behind the curve, but that works in 2025 because people have largely moved on from the sound. So it's like she's all alone in that, even though it might not be the newest thing. No one else is. It doesn't feel like that many people are doing it right now. And I mean, realistically, the whole backstory with her going from this super like kids bop type music to this whole thing, Playboy Bunny from the Berlin BDSM club. I'm all for it. It seems like it's something that she decided to do herself, right? Because there's no other reason why you would do it, because it's behind what's actually happening musically right now. And I think this is the other reason I'm all for it. If you look at all of the straight-laced narc type people on Vkontakte, people who are spiritual boomers, we'll put it like that, they hate the new Glukoza so much, simply because she looks like this. She's scary now. And you know what? Good. Make people uncomfortable. Anyway, the music is actually good. Let me just get in. 100 was the lead single, and I think it's probably the best track on this EP, but none of them are bad. like, again, when it comes to sort of pop or electronic or electro pop or whatever, this isn't like the freshest sound. It feels a little, not dated, but just feels, like I said, a little behind the curve. But at the same time, nobody's really doing this anymore that I've run into. So it feels like there are hyper pop elements in there, but like I said, some of that, like, obviously to the imagery, we're going like sort of a darker Lady Gaga vibe. Although Lady Gaga is at her. Like, this is electro house, and we're gonna come back to electro house too later on, but I loved electro house. I still love electro house, so. So, right, like I said, it's not cutting edge in music, or it's not pushing the envelope, but at the same time, it's done well. I mean, I don't know who she's working with in terms of producers and stuff like that, but the end package is something that I think is it's done quite well. And again, like I said, for somebody who completely reinvented themselves and decided to go this direction with it, I think that's fine, and I think she's doing a good job. So, and I did enjoy this EP. This is Echoes, and the artist is Glukoza. All right, we are getting into, I guess, other stuff now. So this is the album ДЕТИ ХАОСА. I don't know, whatever, it doesn't matter. Children of Chaos. The artists are Skurt, 92, and КРЕСТ. So, I honestly was hesitant to include this one. The first two tracks on this, like, TikTok album, I'm going to come back to that term, but I'm going to call it a TikTok album now, had me expecting that this was just going to be another archive core from some edgy named artists I'd never heard or seen before. But around the third track here, things started to open up, and there's the breadth of the styles, like just the depth to this album. I shouldn't say depth, but there's a wide range of styles that are featured over 8 tracks in something that is like effectively 16 minutes long. On the whole, this isn't an amazing release, right? I'm just going to say that right now. But there are some tracks that really kind of clicked with me. And despite the overall generic, distorted archive core sound of this whole thing, I think that on the strength of a few of these tracks, it is worth mentioning. And again, it's only 15 minutes long, so I do want to just jump into the ones that I enjoyed more than others. Yeah. Like, the album artwork though, guys, come on. That chorus is just where it kind of, I don't know, there's something about it. But there's an acoustic track on this album. I will go to the first 2 tracks so you understand why I wasn't expecting this type of music, right? But like this really vulnerable acoustic track, just kind of there in the middle of everything. We have one that's I've just started referring to as like Russian internet pop. It's just that amalgamation of every conceivable sound. Like when you hear tracks like this, the vocal lines, how everything is interacting, you do realize that these guys do have an understanding of how all of these parts fit together, which sometimes is not the case with and the fact that they have like a track at the very end that makes fun of the old early 2010 mixtapes. It's literally called Swagaholic, which was a whole mixtape thing. I kind of love this too. So, right, those 4 tracks are kind of all doing their own thing. And they're all doing it relatively well. But this is how the album starts. So I heard this first track, I was just like, okay. I heard this, I looked at the name, the font, the picture, and I was just like, okay, this is what this album is going to be. Even the second track is that hyper distorted sort of just, I don't know who this sound is for. I mean, obviously there are artists doing it and who are popular from doing it, but so like the first 2 tracks, if that's all the further you get into the album and you're just like, no, I'm not doing this, then you're gonna miss the stuff that comes later on, which actually shows, I don't know, I feel like more talent musically speaking. So the only thing I would have to say with this album is maybe rethink the sequencing a little bit, and maybe it's one of those things where they don't really care, and maybe that was the whole point, to scare people away. But based on the strength of the stuff that comes later in the album, right? The 4 tracks that I kind of played before hitting the first 2. I don't know. I would like to see and hear more of that, because the sort of hyper distorted archive core sound is fine, but I have a feeling that the shelf life of it is going to be very short-lived. And when everyone is attempting to do it now, or it feels like every other person is attempting to do it now, doing something that is trying to marry more sounds together is maybe a better choice in the long term. But that is the album ДЕТИ, ХАОСА. Yeah, whatever. And the artist is Skurt92 and КРЕСТ. So, and then moving on, we have that album, this album, the next album to some degree are all similar, because like I said, there's that what it's not hyper pop per se, but it's this internet pop that I've run into a lot in Russian music this year, where it is just all of the different sounds together, not necessarily on one track, but over the course of an album. And yes, this was where I mentioned the term TikTok album, and this album right here, which is GRUNGE.CORE by the artist DSPRITE. This is where I kind of decided on the term TikTok album, simply because my general rule is that an EP is less than 6 songs and under 20 minutes. Here we're under 20 minutes, but we have 9 songs. And like, it says it's an album, but to me that doesn't feel like an album. This feels like it's not even a mixtape, because mixtapes have short songs, but they're 30 tracks long effectively, right? So I don't really have a better term for it, but the reason I'm going with TikTok album is because it feels like this is what modern albums have devolved into, where you have a good number of tracks, but they're all like 80 seconds long. So the end product is something that would last you, I don't know, a walk to the metro station type of thing. Anyway, DSPRITE right here, this album feels kind of like a business card for what the artist can do, right? And DSPRITE is a producer. I got lost in my notes. I got lost in what I was talking about too. There isn't too much information about him aside from what he's got on his contacted page, which is already pretty sparse to begin with. So we're just going to go with the producer tag there. On this album, like I said, he is rapping and he is singing. He's doing vocal duties on this album, and it is pretty good. Lyrics are normal. There's nothing to really go on with that there. The main focus here is the music and the production. And like I said, it feels a bit like a resume for him to put out there for people to see, people in the other industry, sort of like, hey, look what I can do. Simply because it feels like every track is slightly different when it comes to genre. I saw no discussion with regards to this release. It's an artist with basically no name recognition as far as I know. But it's also like 15 minutes long. So I listened to it more times than I would have thought. But I think that's kind of the thing too with some of these TikTok albums, is it's the musical equivalent of scrolling social media, right? Scroll social media for 15 minutes and you won't remember most of what you've been looking at or watching or seeing. You'll be left with general impressions. And that's kind of how this TikTok album feels to me, where it's like, I remember certain things, but for the most part, when it all was said and done, even after listening to it multiple times, it was just this smear of emotions that correlated to whatever the tracks were trying to show me. Which is fine, but again, in the long term, I don't know if music for scrolling is a good idea. DSPRITE it seems like he can actually do some good stuff musically speaking, so it would be nice if, and like I said, maybe this is just him, like a calling card, right? Like, hey, hire me and let me act as a producer for you. If that's the case, then I totally get it. If he does continue to make more solo albums or his sort of releases like this, then I would hope that he focuses in a little bit more on the tracks and, does a little bit more with them. But a lot of grunge and core songs too, which kind of makes sense with the GRUNGE.CORE title. Got a little bit of the archive core here. Yeah, I would listen to this album again. Simple. But again, it's just like I would scroll through social media for 15 minutes again. I don't really have to think about this music. But you know what? Sometimes you don't want to. Like, and again, what is the genre? Grunge.CORE, I guess, is the genre. We've actually heard a decent amount of music like this over the year too, from sort of producers who have these rock-inspired albums, which I don't know what that's all about, but I guess, sure. It's not bad. It's inoffensive. It's easy to swallow. It's an album you can just throw on and not have to really think about it too much, and it's also not really going to disappoint you. It's got that kind of energy. It's got a mix of vibes and emotions in there, but overall, yeah, it's well done. So that is the album Grunge.CORE, and that is the artist DSPRITE. Okay, Swimmers down there in the chat mentioned these fellas a little bit earlier on. This is the group ASTHMA Boys with their release ASTHMA Boys Don't Cry. And this is, I think, a perfect example of... I love this. I had a great time with this album. There were a few tracks I wasn't so keen on, but for the most part, I had a good time here. This is, again, that sort of Russian internet pop, a mix of anything and everything that they can throw at the wall and sticks. We've got hip-hop delivery, EDM dance sections, there's archivecore, there's hyperpop, the alt-rock guitars mixed in with the lyrics and the delivery of emo. It's just everything under one roof. It is one big, fun, sweet mix. It is the oral equivalent of buying the 3 or 4 different packages, like the blue package of Skittles, the yellow package of Skittles, the green package of Skittles, and the red package of Skittles, going home, ripping all of them open, and then just dumping all of them into your mouth at once, right? It's super sweet. It's fun and enjoyable. It's just sugar rush. It is kind of hard to remember the individual elements, but, you know, that's okay. Don't be surprised if it all runs together. But I think that's also kind of the point of music like this, is that it's just an overload, but a sugary, good, enjoyable overload. Damn, what do I want to start with here? We'll just go here. I think this is yeah, this will work. I do feel like these guys are gonna blow up a little bit, and yeah, this was got the archivecore there. And since we've talked about Glukoza and Saluki already, the energy is still kind of the same, but like sonically we've moved into slightly different territory, right? I guess I didn't realize Saluki was on here twice too, which is kind of interesting. And they've got Dmitrienko here as well too, which I didn't really pay attention to the first time through.
как смог.
Не зазвонит мне телефон, в этом клубе не связь. Glukoza.prime.com. Когда менеджер занят, им нужен реп новости. Они нас не понимают, как этот вечер растает в твоем бумажном стакане. Даже если будет.
So I think this is the electro house sound as well. Yeah, it is. So
Мы не знали, что так поздно вернемся. Сломали кости, алкоголь меня косит. Sunglass, солнце светится ночь. Они смотрят на нас.
Им нравится очень, что мы совсем не похожи. С тобой мурашки по коже. И можешь делать, что
I
хочешь.
feel like the chorus is where this all comes together.
Мне нравишься очень.
Yeah. Such a good chorus. And you know what? Since we were talking about Vanya Dmytrienko, might as well jump to his track, or the track he's featured on.
Простить тебе всю боль, чтобы вместе ощущать. Мысли чистые, как слабость, знаешь, время не молчи. Ангел, ангел, ты был мой ангел.
Coming back to this now, the last time I listened to this was a few days ago, right? And that it's always the thing with albums where when I'm trying to get through just a bunch of them, I usually listen to them more than once for sure, but I oftentimes don't come back to them until doing the stream. And coming back to this album now feels like coming back to it with, fresh ears. Realistically, yes, this is, I think, even better than I gave it credit for. This is one of those albums that I think I probably should come back to and sit down for a full listen to again, because there are some really good tracks. I would tracks and ideas on this album. So anyway, we'll let it there. It's a very, like I said, it's very sugary, energetic Rush. There's a lot going on, and like I said, it is possible that some of those things won't stick with you musically. The chorus on Очень is one of those. Obviously, the one with Glukoza and Saluki also stuck out in my mind, just for the not chorus necessarily, just that weird the flashing lights, because that's a old school, back when Kanye was still sane kind of reference. But really fun, really good album. Probably should have moved it a little bit higher up. It's basically, I'm not gonna say it's the top. It probably should be the top pick of the week for pop and indie, but here we are. So anyway, give it a listen. It is very good. That's the artist ASTHMA Boys, and as the album ASTHMA Boys Don't Cry. And we've already reached the tab limit, which is something that is terrifying because we have so much more to go. Okay. Yes, forgive me for this, Skurt. Forgive Skurt for this, but this is Sex Music 2000 by Skurt. And this is another one of those, what I would, again, TikTok albums. But this is super, I had a blast with this album. ASTHMA Voice probably is going to have longer legs, or it's going to, go a little bit further. But this is unabashedly trying to recreate the sound and energy of 2006. It might not be the most accurate in that regard, but it hits the sounds and the musical references of that era. At least how we remember it now. Like, obviously, if you go back and listen to music from 2006, it's going to be different. But at the same time, if you think about music from 2006, it feels like this in your head at times. This is dumb music. It's fun music. it's just dumb fun, right? We're going to put those two things together. It's honestly, and I don't know if this is done intentionally, the last few albums that we've looked at, right? Like ASTHMA Boys, DSPRITE, even ДЕТИ, ХАОСА, these feel like super energetic and upbeat and just fun, right? And it's not necessarily the music that you would play at a holiday party, but at the same time, it does have that like end of the year sort of New Year's energy where you just want to have a party and dance around and be dumb and just kind of forget about all the bullshit that 2025 threw everyone's way. Right? It's the type of music for a time when the socioeconomic realities of this country, yeah, I don't know, currently make it a little bit easier to look back on 2006 fondly, now that it is 2 decades removed from us. So I'm going to play some of this music. The track that immediately I got to point it out, this is the musical reference here. Just, what does this remind you of? Yeah, right. Like, this isn't exactly the 2006 sound. Obviously, it's definitely not Sexy Back. Certainly not that track. The other thing to keep in mind, too, is it a lot of times marries together the sound of Russian music from 2006 with Western music from 2006, which I think is also important to clarify. Did we have Skrillex already in 2006? I feel like... Oh, the drowning pool is here, though. That's what that, let the bodies hit the floor. That's right. Yeah, okay. Skrillex began in... Yeah. So... I don't know. I think that was the thing too with some of the albums this week, where I was just like, I don't want to think anymore. I just want to something dumb and fun. Also, I love that line. Been a lot of Sergei Zverev references this year in music too, which I'm not sure what that's all about, but that's one of those people I'd kind of forgotten about. A very specific pop culture reference, a Russian one from like 15 years ago or so. So yeah, I don't. Is this pop music? This maybe should have been in the electro category, all things considered. But whatever. Here it is. This is, if you're looking for something that has a bit of a throwback sound that doesn't take itself too seriously, and just straight up lifts "Sexy Back" from Justin Timberlake, and sort of pickpockets that song into the album, then yeah, you'll be good to go with this. This is Sex Music 2000, and the artist is Skurt. I feel like the clothing and whatnot is a little off, but it's okay. He's pretty close. Okay. Now we've got in my opinion, the sort of top pop and indie release of this week, which is Полярность, with the self-titled album Полярность. I have no idea how this album ended up in my music list. This is from November. It was like at the very end of November. But last week after the stream, when I was kind of sitting around, just, I don't know, doing whatever on the computer, I played some music. I just played something from the November playlist because I didn't have any December music, because last Friday was the first Friday of December, so I didn't have anything in a December playlist, so I was like seeing, I just chose something at random in the November playlist, and I'm glad this was it. This is an absolute gem, just a fantastic album from an artist who hasn't put out anything prior to this. It's something that kind of looks, from what I've gathered online, that a project that they started for fun or whatever. The core sound here is retro synth pop, but the arrangement and the vocals don't feel like just a copy or a knockoff of that sound. And it honestly doesn't feel like somebody who's even obsessed with that era musically. It just feels like that's the sound that they wound up going for. It's similar to the synth sound of Walter Migo, which is a completely unknown, now defunct band out of Chicago, which I love to bring up whenever possible. So Walter Migo. But yes, so listening to this, I was reminded of that group quite a bit, which plus for me. There's also just kind of an inherent goofiness to the musical sounds that are being used, and it works with what the artist is going for, which is something that's lighthearted, not very serious. That in mind, lyrics are not mindless. There is some thoughts and some poeticism to the lyrics as well. Yeah, it's 8 tracks. Honestly, I know I didn't favorite this one, but that's just because I wouldn't skip a single track on this album. I think they're all good, and I do hope that the artist, Полярность, does continue, because this is, I thought this was a phenomenal little album. There's the retro synthy sound, obviously, right off the bat. Right, but this is not the retro synth sound anymore. It still has the electro, sort of the synth, or the synthesizers and everything, but I'm going to play a little bit of this track and then one more, and I think that'll be a fair sampling of the sound. So we have the...
Скажи, что чувствуешь, поверь, я кладезь из историй. Давай придумаем теперь сюжет, что нас достоин. В нем будет небо и гроза, в нем будут теплые слова и раны острием ножа до грубой боли. Мне покажи, каков твой мир. Безумно интересен ты мне, безумно интересен ты мне.
Jump just a tidge too far forward, but that's okay. That very wavery sort of synth in the background, that was one of the Walter Migo things. It's just like that, yeah. And then one last little it's very simple, but there's something, I don't know, it's very genuine at the same time. And it might just be one of those situations too where that genuineness and the simplicity of the sound, after a lot of that sort of very, very well produced, but sort of very seriously produced music that we've heard before in the pop and indie category today, this was just like a breath of fresh air in some ways. But like I said, I listened to this just after the stream last week too, so it's not necessarily like I was burnt out from those other albums. So, I don't know. Very light, very simple, just very like a pretty album, but also fun and kind of bouncy. It's a self-titled album, and the artist is Полярность. So, I don't know. I'm going with that as the top of the pop and indie category for this week. And we are going to move on to electronic music. And the first one that there's only two here. The first one is an EP. It's called Mercury. The artist is Last Century. I haven't had any instrumental kind of hip-hop beat albums for a while, and funk music, PHONK, has been surprisingly absent from the music discussion for most of the year, probably because it's typically used in singles and remixes, but that's beside the point. So this EP right here, I don't know, it's something different from what we normally run into. It's also one of those sounds that seems so obvious, but which I personally have not encountered before. It's basically the Memphis rap sound mixed with funk, PHONK, and more ethereal, atmospheric synths and electronics, with an end result that feels like it's the chopped and screwed era of Houston remixes slammed together with the beats of Clam's Casino. Feels kind of equally forward-thinking and futuristic, while at the same time nostalgic and crate digging. Just a nice artist that I discovered with this one. Yeah. It's a short EP, but I think we got that kind of retro wave here. But now we got that chopped and screwed sort of Memphis rap sound. Oh, I forgot the chiptune. There's a chiptune section there too.
Either joy or love.
I think again, the sort of very atmospheric, synthy, futuristic with the Memphis chopped and screwed sort of sound going on. Very interesting mix of sounds here, and I don't typically go back and start digging through artists' discographies when doing this. I just kind of take things as they are. But I do, based on the strength of this EP, I do hope that Last Century, I don't know, puts out some other stuff. This kind of his thing. So that is the EP Mercury by Last Century, if you're looking for something a little bit different in that sense. But this next one. Oh, yes. I had a lot of fun with this one. And it's got a fucking awesome monster truck music. This is the artist Boris Redwall. And somewhere between deep house, EDM, realistically electro house, and whatever the hell Die Antwoord were, we've got this album. I remember Boris Redwall put out his first album last year with Fantasy, and I remember having I enjoyed the album. But this is the glitchy, hyperactive techno. This is electro house, but it feels like the modern day equivalent to Boys Noise, the Bloody Beetroots, or even Mastercraft, which are all artists, and that was a scene, the electro house scene like that, or the electro clash scene like that I absolutely loved back in the day. So I'm all for this album. I was listening to this. I even was sitting here just working or whatever, and I would have my fist kind of pumping a little bit. There are just the energy on this album is fantastic if you're into that type of thing. Also, yeah, I do love the PS1 style, or PS2, I suppose, at this point in time. I'm gonna jump ahead. The other thing with this album, I will say too, is it's not one seamless mix. Obviously, there are breaks between the tracks, but it does feel like the type of thing that could easily be just strung together into like a continuous mix. And it feels like it would it's got festival energy, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. Yeah, if I had a monster truck, this is the only thing I would be listening to in the monster truck. I don't know how a sound system would hold up in a monster truck, though. I feel like either it would, I don't know, the weight might throw it out of balance, or the minute you roll over a parked car, you would, I don't know, ruin your sub or something. Yeah, and then, I mean, the vocal samples, too, throughout the album, too, are pretty on point. This obviously isn't the first album this week that has this attempt at traveling musically back in time. But I think this is the one where it's done. I don't think Boris Redwall was like, I'm gonna make an album that sounds like it's from whatever year. I think he just was like, he's got a sound that he wanted to make an album with, and that's the one that he ended up. And this just feels like an album that could have been released in like 2010, 2012, around that period of time. So I don't know. It's got that energy throughout the whole thing. Just it's the type of album, if you're into the genre, that you just really want to play it loud and just bounce effectively, like you're in a monster truck. So yes. Honestly, one of the most fun I've had with an electronic release in a good while here, or at least that's how long it feels. This is monster truck music, and the artist is Boris Redwall. I will be listening to that more in the future as well. But we finish up with, well, for new releases, we're finishing up with rap and hip hop. I have two leftovers. This is actually one that was left over from November. I didn't get around to it. I love Zaraza. We got the Ash EP a few months back. It felt like kind of this more realistic take on life in Cheboksary, or yeah, he's from Cheboksary, so kind of a slightly more depressive, but you know, kind of realistic thing. This is the yin to the yang of that, or vice versa. I don't know how the yin and yang thing works. I'm an American, so whereas if Ash was exploring the sort of the gray, ashier life of Cheboksary, then this is the flame, right? Plamya is the name of the EP here. It's the flame that is burning. It's got kind of the energy. Songs here are more energetic, more focused on like the game. There's obviously still introspection in the lyrics, but it's definitely more of like of higher energy and less depressive. I don't know. Every time I listen to Zaraza, I get this. I'm always reminded of Jeezy back when he was still young Jeezy. I can't explain it. I think it's the production partly, but there's just something about him that reminds me of young Jeezy, and I loved young Jeezy, so.
Будто на кону медали. И все свои запары я тушу, будто хабарик. Я мчу, чтоб долететь туда, где очень сильно ждали. Перед вами снова слов река сложилась в оригами, намекая, что пока мы тут руками крошим камень, чтоб входящие так часто не мелькали на экране. Трубку на автоответчик ставлю, пусть он всех достанет. Позвоните позже, абонент занят.
I think it's his choruses. Something in his choruses reminds me of Jeezy. Yeah, and then obviously the beats. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he's part of that same crew as like ATL, so like that sound kind of carries over here. I think the Russian scene has, like, does Velial Squad count as horrorcore? I feel like it's close to that. It's not exactly horrorcore, but it's like it's in the orbit of horrorcore as far as I feel.
Идем со мной вместе, мы так похожи на детей, играем роли в пьесе. Это не просто песня. Флексим на рефлексе, делаю это целый день, пойдем со мной вместе. Мы так похожи на детей, играем роли в пьесе.
Do you know Velial Squad? If not, check them out, because it's not exactly horrorcore, but like they wear the balaclavas and like it might, like I said, it's not exactly horrorcore, but I feel like it's pretty close to that. So yeah, that's the EP Plamya by Zaraza. Kind of, if you're familiar with Zaraza, it's kind of the same thing, just a little bit more energetic and a little less sort of bleak. His last EP and his last album, yeah, check out Velial Squad. His last EP and his last album were a little bit more bleak and realistic. This is, like I said, a little bit more upbeat and bouncy. Also, Я застрял в Ziplocie is kind of a fun one too, and I'm not sure how it got past Roskomnadzor, but I guess I'm on Spotify too, so I don't know. Maybe on Yandex Music, that's a different story. Anyway, moving on. We have, this is like a straight up, I don't know, I feel like this is super underground. Maybe not. This is Okolo Rap with the album Strashные русские сказки. Absolutely godly underground rap, a little bit of some rapчик out of St. Petersburg. It's got bleak, old school beats with lyrics that are just sort of gritty, grimy. Kind of a little bit of the East Coast feel. Plenty of that, the DJ scratching on the tracks as well too, which gives it, I think, that old school feel as well. Instrumentals are quite reflective, some strings and things like that. It feels like it's an unearthed, like just very good underground rap out of St. Petersburg. Also, it's got some pretty decent per kilogram Slimus. It's got decent guests.
Отдам долги, стрелканемся у белой воды. Чисто как в старых мифах, обниму как родного. Чужих не надо, нахуй надо освоиться дома. И если страшно, давай убегай. Со мной костлявый Кощей и Папа Яга. Не продадутся за гроши и злоты. Нет, ищи меня с водяным на болотах. Там, где прячется сайгу под полом изба. Не говори потом, что не знал. Если на нашу рощу тянешь клешни, то заебашит первый встречный леший. Тамбовский волк ночью выл за бараком. Он не товарищ, да товарищ прапор. Сила в правде, брат, ее не растопчет кирза. Купола золотые, скупая слеза. В болоте тихо тащу свою лихо. Шумит березка, цветет облепиха. Коли поддержал, когда не оставлю в бою. Нет, крыс тут нет, их сожрал кот Баюн.
Посещение секции бокса благословляется. И если есть ситуация, которая...
It's got a very heavy atmosphere the whole thing through, like, but that's kind of the point of it, I guess. It is scary Russian fairy tales or scary Russian stories, so.
Бей в капусту как можешь, правша бей справа.
Трактор ковался в подвалах спортзала. Служба залычки, значки и медали.
But this is also one of those albums too where it is very much like you want to, I mean, you can just listen to it for the vibe, I guess, but it is one of those more lyrical albums where you do. It's not the most detailed storytelling, but it does a pretty good job of painting some pictures as well, if you're paying attention lyrically, so.
Верен семейству, как Тони Сопрано. Тут всегда мало, тащите еще. Плачу за все, за базар и за счет.
But yeah, if you're looking for something
Кто там сидит на облаках? Я целовал уши.
slightly, I'm like, this is, it's a heavy album in the sense of it just like atmospheric wise, it's very pressing. But you know what? Sometimes you want that.
То, что засело глубоко, словно в боку заточка. Ты позови меня, и я приду хоть днем, хоть ночью. Теперь гляди, я замутил.
I think you get the idea. It's got a specific sound, but lyrically it's there. The delivery is solid. I don't like the way Okolo Rap strings his lines together and fits everything, and I got no complaints there. So that is the artist Okolo Rap and the album Strashные русские сказки. Just kind of a nice underground joint from St. Petersburg. Okay. We are coming to the final 3 new releases for this week. And here we have 64 письмо. 60, can I say it like that? Is that fair? 64 письмо. With the artist Lil Kid, sorry, not little, Lil Kid. I actually listened to this younger artist from Saratov's last release, which came out in August. And I actually almost featured it back then. I just didn't come back around to it, as tends to be the case. I enjoyed it back then. I didn't sit down, write my notes out, and I kind of forgot about it. So listening to this album was a bit of some musical deja vu, and kind of rightfully so. Lil Kid's, it's going to be hard for me to not screw that up. Lil Kid's sound is a combination of R&B with Russian trap. But it's mixed together with a voice that has a slightly nasal aspect to the delivery, which makes it kind of memorable in its own way. I saw some dismissals of him as an artist back in August, but lyrically, it's fairly generic. It is focused on like this sort of love and longing. Lyrically, it's stuff that's more traditional in the R&B genre. I don't think there's anything to hate here. I thought this was an overall like solid, enjoyable album. It's kind of a unique sound, at least that I have encountered thus far. And it's the third album he's put out this year, so kind of good on him for that as well. I honestly, it's been a while since... Yo, my headphones, what are we doing? I feel like the voice might be what annoys people, which... Yeah, I know it's 60. It's just 50, 60.
Я знаю, ты знаешь, что я не отдамся никому, называй меня жадным. Ты первый не кашляешь, и ты знаешь, что мне нравится, малышка, расскажи, как ощущается. Он просто меня бесит, или он просто бедный, малышка, ты сама чувствуешь разницу. Разве для тебя он сможет взорвать на Брюнелло? Разве он сможет удержаться на твоих качелях? Все эти письма, касаясь тебя.
Oh, I forgot about this one, yeah, with the sort of the rockin' elements here.
Сейчас мое сердце, значит неправильно его надену. Мы как паруса, тебя раздувает ветер, меня это смола. Знаешь, я не брошу, я отличный моряк. Поэтому в тебя я хочу понырять. Поэтому в тебя я хочу понырять. Моя кровать, твои слеза. Мы высоко, здесь нечем дышать. Поэтому ща моя голова. Я в темноте, здесь давно нету тепла. Ровно с того момента, когда ты меня оставил. Меня больше не послушается моя голова. Ты мой кислород, я не могу дышать. Бесполезно.
Like there's a lot of, I mean, this whole album is sort of like I said, not heartbreak, but yearning, and not necessarily love lost either, but kind of, I don't know.
Твои карие глаза видели много темноты. Все, что мы хотели, это делать трэп и не оставаться бедными. Клянусь, все эти рэперы нихуя не знают ничего о верности. Бери мое слово, тяни за язык.
What I will say is, over this year, I have run into a few younger artists from the regions that have put out quite a few releases that I think we'll be hearing more of in the next year. I think Lil Kid is one of them. To Hug and Whole Lot of Swag. I feel like Whole Lot of Swag this year is having kind of having a good year, but I feel like, I don't know. I feel like there's something here, and so yeah, again, lyrically and just delivery wise, it is closer to R&B, but there is that the trap elements in there as well. I think it's a nice combination of sounds. It's again something that I don't think I've really heard much of this year, and I've listened to a lot of stuff, both good and bad. So the fact that this specifically stands out in my memory is either a sign that my memory's gone to complete shit, or that it is something worth remembering. So that is the artist Lil Kid. And then for Korzik here, I will pronounce it properly, 64 pismo, or the 64th letter, the 64 being a reference to Lil Kid's home region of Saratov. Okay. The final two, and these are, yes, I think it's pronounced Unique, NK, and ARTEM SHILOVETS. I don't know, whatever. I'm pretty sure they're all from Belarus as well, too. That's beside the point. This is their album, Make Pop Music Great Again. Now, I got to talk about this. These guys last year put out an album that was massive and had probably one of the biggest songs of the year with Glamour. I fucking hated that song. I hated Glamour with a passion. Objectively, there was nothing wrong with that song. Glamour was a fine. I can even see why people liked it, but it was maybe the fact that it dominated online music so much. I don't know. Maybe it was the lyrics. Maybe it was everything combined. Maybe it was just the sound of it that rubbed me the wrong way. It lodged itself and the rest of the album. I listened to their album last year as well, too. I don't want to say that it's just one song. I listened to that entire album, and it lodged itself into my mind as the equivalent of Dance Monkey by Tones and I. Now, if you don't know what Dance Monkey is, Google it later. It is another one of those songs that I cannot stand. Again, another one of those songs, objectively, nothing wrong with it. It's a fine song, but I can't stand it. And Glamour was the same thing. I listened to that album once and I walked away from it. So when I saw, they're from Minsk. When I saw the trio out of Minsk was back earlier with another release. They actually put out a release in July. It was 2007, Chast Vtaraya, back in July. I honestly didn't talk about that album back in July because I listened to the first few tracks and I wasn't having anything to do with it. It felt, I don't know, just dumb. And so when this album came along, I thought I might just do a hard pass on it. But it came out at the start of December, the start of the month. The playlist is empty, and I thought I'd give it a shot. And while I can say I still don't really like the group, with this album, they're doing a fairly good job of replicating the pop hip-hop sound of 20 years ago. I think that's, if they gave an album the title 2007 Part 2 earlier this year, and now they're doing Make Pop Music Great Again, which means that they're going back to an older sound, it kind of makes sense. Thinking about that, I figured out what to compare this trio of artists, what group to compare them to. And it is LMFAO. Do you remember LMFAO? Party Rock Anthem, Sexy and I Know It? Of course you do. You remember those songs. Those were inescapable back in the day. Now, was that music bad? Not at all. People loved it. It was inescapable. And we all kind of enjoyed it to a degree. But even then, even back in whatever the hell year it was that Sexy and I Know It and Party Rock Anthem came out, even back then, listening to those songs, somewhere in the back of your mind, you probably knew it was like, this is going to get annoying at some point in time and probably not going to age very well. Like a drinkable yogurt that you forget in the backseat of your car. Like, when it is rediscovered, it's going to be like, I don't know if this is that great. This is fun music, right? And if you're looking for something idiotic and bouncy, right? I did feature Skurt earlier with his Sex Music 2006. This is, I think, a more mainstream approach to that. And here, too, I would actually say the lyrics are probably one of those things where it's better to just ignore them. I feel like the lyrics here are funny lyrics, but in the way that funny lyrics are not actually that funny when you start to unpack them. So musically, good. Have a great time. Just turn off your mind. It's like it's LMFAO all over again in that sense. I found myself having fun in that regard too when I stopped paying attention to what they were singing about, just was getting caught up in the music. But like a lot of stars from the 2000s quickly fell off, I think there's also an understanding of why musically this stuff, for better or worse, maybe didn't stick around. because there are certain things on this album I'm just like, yeah, didn't age very well. I gotta play this track too, because this is the one, Russian Federation. This is the track that made me have that LMFAO connection. I don't remember if they like straight up reference the song either, but it might just be the beat. I think it's a reference to Party Rock Anthem. Just ignore the lyrics. Like, I hate their excessive use of auto-tune, and I think that's, yeah, LMFAO. This is the track, yeah. I mean, you could just ignore this album and go back and listen to Party Rock Anthem or Sexy and I Know It. But it is interesting that so far on the stream and in releases that came out at the beginning of December, we've got LMFAO, we've got Justin Timberlake, Sexy Back, right? Like, maybe there's something else in there that I forgot. I feel like there's maybe something, though, to investigate there. Why now? Why this, in Russian music, this desire to return to the mid-2000s, to an era 20 years ago, effectively. Make of that what you will. Listening to this album, pretty much every single track is gonna trigger some deja vu, because I feel like every single track is based on a hit from 20 years ago in one form or another, which like isn't necessarily a bad thing. It makes it an album that is more palatable for that way, or in that way. Oh, that's actually really good. I forgot about that quote by Medvedev. So yes, even though, yes, as Medvedev so succinctly put it, нельзя вернуться в 2007 год. I guess you can musically, and that's what this album is effectively attempting to do. And you know what? It does work. This is, in a way, this is musical escapism, and I do think that this is going to find, I think this is going to find a group of people who want to listen to it, and it's probably going to be successful. Maybe not as successful as Glamour, but that's another story. So yeah, if you want to get that energy of sort of pop music from about 20 years ago, but the Russian equivalent to it, I guess, then this is actually going to be an okay album. Like I said, try to ignore the lyrics. The lyrics are pretty cringe or just out and out bad at times, but musically everything kind of comes together. So this is the album Make Pop Music Great Again, by the trio Unique NK or Nikkei and ARTEM SHILOVETS. And that brings us to the final album, and I guess it's the album of the week. I don't know. I don't really. I just have to talk about it last because it's one of those. OJ Buda. Скучаю, но еще работаю. I mean, I got to get this out of the way right from the start. When he released SZN at the start of the year, I was not impressed. OJ Buda for me has always been one of those artists who, despite the flexibility and the fact that he's always putting music out, flexibility when it comes to like the styles that he works in rap, I just never really got him as an artist. something about the delivery or the beats that he used, or it just hasn't clicked with me. And SZN that he released at the beginning of the year back in January, it was the first one I actually sat down and listened to from start to finish. Probably the biggest problem with that choice was that that was a mixtape, and it was the mixtape aspect of it, where it was musically all over the place and lyrically all over the place. It felt like it was at odds with itself, which that's fine. That's what mixtapes are for. Artists just get everything out. Still Working doesn't have that issue. This album, like I Miss You, But I'm Still Working, doesn't have this issue. It's basically one, and this is going to sound horrible, it's basically one long, desperate letter plea to his ex. This is Drake sad boy rap, but instead of the whole woe is me, I'm so rich and promiscuous, but I refuse to learn from my mistakes, even though it's been decades since I don't know, I'm so sick of Drake at this point in time. Buda here is, in the course of this album, addressing his shortcomings, his misdeeds. He talks about his newly acquired sobriety, or something that I guess is within the last year. It's lyrically something that feels like it should overstay its welcome, just because it's kind of the same thing over and over again. But the earnestness, at least what it feels like on this album, and the music, because musically it does feel Drake-like at times. And musically, Drake typically has good stuff, especially back in the day. And the fact that the music does change the tone from track to track keeps it relatively fresh. So even though lyrically we're kind of running into the same thing over and over again, the fact that it doesn't feel like a gimmick, the fact that it does actually feel like Buda is effectively throwing himself at a wall, which I think, right, like that train has departed, but it's still just him like literally ripping his heart out. And there's a voyeuristic aspect to that as well too. But that it feels earnest in that regard. And then musically, like everything works together. There's enough variety that it doesn't get boring. When I played this, I was expecting a repeat of SZN, but instead we got an album that, while perhaps not reflective of the artist's overall output, it does show, at least on an individual level, a person maturing, or at least learning from their mistakes, attempting to atone, or at the very least doing a hell of a convincing mimicry of all of that. So, I honestly, there's like, it's a big album, right? 23 tracks, an hour and 5 minutes long. I kind of don't even know where to jump into, but we'll just jump in here.
К чему привели все события? Между нами нет развития. Расплата за чертов лайфстайл, субсидия. Надеюсь, ты знаешь, что я приложил все усилия. Все случайности не случайны. Мне хуёво, а ты слишься, но все равно оба скучаем. К чему привели все события?
Like, even if you can't understand Russian, I think you can recognize the Drake here. And one of the things, and I feel like I don't need to say this, but one of the things that made Drake so big of a star when he first came out was this sense that he was opening up and being vulnerable and pouring himself out. It's just, he's been doing it for 30 years, and it's just like, or 20 years or whatever. It's just like, now there are other tracks where he does have this sort of like swagger thing going on here. This is a track to like all of the women he's been with, all of his exes, right? Like,
мой лучший друг, тебя ценю. То, что упоминаю других, baby, не ревнуй. Просто коммерческий ход, чтобы трек зашел девчонкам. Не удивлюсь, если не зайдет после этой восьмерки. Я продолжу.
And maybe one of the things I would say here too is, and again, I'm not an OG Buda fan. I don't know his back catalog in any sort of depth. I've had people show me tracks in the past and just sort of like, okay, yeah, that's fine. But I feel like what I've heard from him in the past has had more auto-tune, and it feels like on this album it's still there, to be sure, but it's just much more tuned down and roped in, wrangled in, and I think that helps too with like the overall product. Like he's using it, but I don't know, it doesn't feel as aggressive as I feel like I've heard in the past. I mean, sometimes it's very evident, but I guess what I'm gonna try to do too with some of these tracks that I jump around to is highlight the difference in the music here across the album. Like,
Я хочу в твое сердце, не просто в пизду, бэйби. Чувство, будто ты рядом сейчас на стул, бэйби. Люби меня как обычного, соси как селебрити. Даже когда не вместе, мы взаимно ответственны. Сейчас поет половина меня, ведь успели стать целым. Другая половина где-то счастлива с тобой в трезвости.
like that's more of the classic Buda that I'm familiar with. And that's the Buda that I never really like got. But that sound doesn't make a ton of appearances on this album.
Литературный Мерли, не вообрази настоящий на микро пичет с рилами. Не понимаю, что такое счастье, я едет с силами. Но понимаю, что ты во мне все чаще is telling me. Малые крадут твою свадьбу, baby, you be stealing me. My flow be fucked up, guess it's cause of the sorry. Ты смол, прямой он скрутил. Я вундеркинд, но остановился в саморазвитии. Это осознавать не прикольно, больно, трудно.
So you can hear just in terms of the lyrical delivery, right? Like that we're kind of on the same topic or the same emotion through the album. And I mean, Buda's delivery is kind of like this most of the time, but I also the final track has Sirotkin on this, which is an indie group I featured a few weeks ago. So them showing up here was like was a nice way to round the album out, and it puts a nice like full stop, just because it stands out so much musically from the rest of the album. The inclusion of the like clean guitar sound and like, even if you don't want to listen to the rest of the album, that's fine. But I feel like this final track, Grisha Sirotkin, is still worth your time. This track by itself is just a very good track. The two artists, or the two groups, if you will, together, it works together. В какой-то степени мне даже страшно, в какой-то степени не знаю, как отважился. Я не мало, я не буду сейчас оправдываться. This is one of those things that sometimes doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen a lot anymore. But tracks that feel like a conclusion, that feel like we've gone through all of this together, and this is the final statement, whether it be choruses or music, things that swell and build. And it does here. And I feel like, I don't know, I really have to point that out. There's just something great about that. So that is the album Скучаю, но еще работаю. The artist is OG Buda, and I think it's worth a listen. I'm not a Buda fan in any sense of the word, but I think there's something here, and I think, like I said, just the emotion and the earnestness behind what he has to say here does feel real. So I'm going with that for the top pick of the week. That's what we're finishing up with new releases. But we had some requests. We're going to talk about 3 albums that people requested below, in the comments below last week's video after it went live. So we're going to be talking first up about the album Nuda from the group. I don't know. This is like Stastika. I think that's how we're going with it. It's from June of last year, so it's not that old. I'll be honest. This one did not really click with me so much. The main problem is that the music is good. It's that off-kilter, left field adjacent tempo, like kind of sparse, lots of, maybe not left field. Left field's probably not the best choice there. The music is good. If you're into that type of music, I guess is what I'll say. And it's a type of music that doesn't get made very often. So I think the problem is it's paired together with lyrics that are too dense. And even though the beats are just kind of all over the place, they're scattershot, and you would think that it would be easy to deliver text over them, it still cannot gel with the beats. And while this type of stilted and jilted type of delivery and music is good, it's kind of fun, even on a short album or like a TikTok album like this, right, it was 14 minutes long, it gets old. Not that I didn't want to stop listening to it, I just stopped paying attention, and that's not great. If there were no lyrics, or if the lyrics were more sparse, if the artist was using vocal samples from like films or I don't know, like speeches or something like that, then I feel like it would be more engaging. But this, if you go on Genius and you pull up the lyric sheet for this, it's just like a wall of text, and it's like, it's fine, but it's also not anything all that amazing. I feel like this was just a thing that the artist kind of was playing around with, and that's fine, but I feel like something in the formulation here needs to be mixed up. If there were no lyrics here, I could listen to this. It would be one of those like weird avant-garde type releases, but I could get into it. As it is, I feel like I'm getting pulled in 2 directions, and I don't know. So yeah, this album right here, I don't remember who requested it, who suggested it. I don't know. I kind of get what the artist was going for, but it just doesn't. Like, it kind of starts to sound all the same. You kind of stop paying attention. So I don't know. Maybe there's somebody out there who will hear this and enjoy it, but that is, it doesn't. It's not quite. Like I said, something in that formula needs to be adjusted because it's not balanced in a meaningful way. But yeah, that's the album Nuda by Stastika. Now he did put out an EP like in the first half of the year this year. So maybe he did change some things up there, but I don't know. I didn't go and listen to it. The next 2 though are ones I think that Russians will maybe notice or recognize. The first one is Давай забудем о морали by THMA. And when this was suggested to me, I was pretty sure that I had heard it before. And I'm pretty sure as I was listening to this that I had heard it before. I don't know, it's hard to say. If I did listen to this back around 2012 or 2013 or 2014, I didn't at that time pay much attention to the lyrics, and this is where the album really shines. Songs are kind of largely about freaks and oddballs on the edge of society. There's a track about somebody who's deathly afraid of germs, a man who masturbates in front of his window for everyone to see, a jealous guy who's trying to scare a girl he's interested in a way, trying to scare her away from, like, obviously better partners, if you will. There's a young outcast boy who wants to be rebellious and cool, but then it just isn't fated to be. And then, yeah, there's the schoolboy who equates his suffering at the hands of his peers to that of Christ. That's actually the song that I did recognize. That's where I kind of... Long story short, it's just kind of all of the... Not riffraff, but I guess, whatever, the riffraff, if you will. It's an album that, while some of the characters could be slightly updated for 2025, it still feels like it could accurately represent a slice of Russian life, or realistically life in most countries, right? Just like the people at the fringes. And we're going to come back to that idea with the next album as well. And I'm going to use an analogy with that one. They're obviously both connected as well, too. I want to get that out of the way now. It's also the type of album, let's be real, THMA, it's the type of album that Roskomnadzor would probably restrict immediately in 2025, or at least some of the tracks, or half of the tracks. But it's, honestly, what really makes this album shine, though, too, is the experimental aspect of the music. This is hip-hop, but it's a side project of the Четыре позиции Bruno. It's from those guys, and who we're going to be talking about next. I don't know. It still sounds good in 2025. Hold on. Where's the... Yes, this is the one that I immediately recognized. And I think this is a pretty good one to go with.
Голобородь католик, учусь в 8 классе. Каждый третий в нашей школе ко мне в портфеле лазил, чтобы приколоться за пластмассового попугая. Это амулетик оберег.
Obviously, the crux of this music is the lyrics. But if you don't understand Russian, I feel like I said before, musically, this is oddball enough that, like, eclectic in its own way, and it is still, I don't know, ear-catching in its own way. Yeah, like, I absolutely remember hearing this back in the day. I don't know why, but...
Я не сторонник назального раздрая, но становилось скучновато и выбирая между движником до дома и угаром на танцполе, выбрал второе почти по своей воле. Ребята обещали кайф не ебаться, они сдержали обещание, спасибо, паца. Я отдался во власть лихого танца.
Like, if you can understand the lyrics, the character studies on these tracks is... It's just entertaining. And I don't want to say that... I don't want to say that, like, a lot of these characters are somewhat humorous. Like, the individual here in Numero Uno is kind of humorous. On Чужой, on Плохой, also kind of humorous in the freakishness of these people. This is the one about sort of voyeurism and in a more extreme form. like, it's grotesque, but that grotesquerie isn't supposed to leave you disgusted or like, it's kind of like a weirdo. I mean, like, that's what I get from it. So this is, like I said, this is the hip-hop side project of the 4 positions of Bruno, right? 4 позиции Bruno. And that's the next group we're going to talk about. And I'm going to leave that open. The other album that I was sort of suggested to listen to is Я заказан, which is kind of like, I'm assuming Zakaz here is like a hit, so I have a hit put out on me or something along those lines. Now, I had listened to other albums by 4 позиции Bruno back in the day, Откровенная ванная, and like 1000%, something with acid, кислота. Those albums were difficult. The first one was a lot like Grouper, which is like one of those Pitchfork bands from back in the day. And then the other one, the Acid album, was a lot like Fuck Buttons. Kind of just, again, 2 oddball references thrown there. This one I had never heard before, and it feels like it is somewhere between the 2. It's got the dense, oppressive atmosphere of Grouper on tracks like Red Pajamas. But it's not slow. There's enough, the tempo's fast enough, and it is chaotic enough that instead of it feeling like, I don't know, like just this overwhelming depressive atmosphere, it feels like a trip that's about to go off the rails, right? Like you're trying to hold it together, but you're doing a really, really bad job of it. Like, you're like, oh God. You know, you're trying to ignore the shadow figures out the corner of your eye. And then there's a track like Spring here, which seems to be about heroin or alcohol abuse, and or the withdrawals that accompany that. And the music that fits with it feels like a fever dream, or biele garячка, right? Like the delirium tremens. I'm gonna jump ahead to the... Wait. The sort of opera voices in the background, it feels like the track is spinning a little bit too. And I don't know if that's in the mastering, if there is actually like the levels are shifting back and forth. But it makes you feel uncomfortable as well there. But and then we've got this track here, right, with Brother. And this has got the same lyrically bent as Давай забудем о морали, because again, this is basically partly the same guys. But here, the characters in the songs are not they're supposed to be serious. We're supposed to take them seriously. There's nothing funny here. These are all like kind of serious situations. And I think musically, let me just... Oh, right, okay. Musically, this reminds me of the photographer the work of photographer Diane Arbus. And let me just... Arbus had a lot of... I don't know if there... I could have Googled this in advance, but Arbus was famous for taking pictures of people who were on the fringes of society, people with various disabilities, people who were cross-dressers or transvestites or whatever, people who had genetic defects, people who just by and large, especially in the era when she was working, which I don't remember that exactly, but anyway, it doesn't matter. These are people who would have been ignored, right? Shunted out of the public eye, as I said, on the fringes of society. But Arbus tried to find what made them, not what made them human, but sort of photograph them and bring that to the front, right? That these people who were often ignored and even sort of explicitly shunned, that they were the same, like that they were people just like the rest of us, and kind of held that up for us to see as the viewer. I don't know how large this is in this stream, but hopefully it's large enough. And I feel like especially with Я заказан, I feel like there is quite a bit of that. This album feels like it kind of explores the people that, not on every single track, but on a lot of the track, it feels like it is exploring people or archetypes that Russian society tries to keep hidden away, and brings them into the light, not necessarily as freaks, but as the flesh and blood that they are. And the music is just simply acting as the emotional weight, right? We can't see these people, but like, as I said, in Spring, in a song that seems to be about withdrawals, we're supposed to be feeling that with them. In a track that seems like it is about somebody who is joining something that feels a little bit like a cult, it's got this clapping in the background and some voices back there. It is supposed to, it's romantic in that way, in the sense that romantic music, that movement was designed, or that it was aimed to, through music, create an image in people's heads, that they didn't need to actually see something, that through the music they would be able to experience it. And this feels like a character study, a romantic, in that sense of romantic music, a romantic character study. Just the characters here are the ones that we typically try to avoid and ignore. The themes of sickness and weakness of the flesh are here pretty much in every single track. And this is one of those albums too, just like the one before. The one before it is a little bit less serious. It's a lot less serious at times. This one, there are parts of some of the tracks and some of the tracks in general that are poetic in their own way. It's a difficult album. Both of them are difficult albums. It's just, I would say, Я заказан is more of a difficult album, and both of them as well are albums that you have to be in the right mood for. But I feel like Давай забудем о морали and Я заказан, both of these albums are probably, if you go back and you look through Afisha, and for those of you who do not know, Afisha is the main Russian kind of pop culture magazine. If you go back and you look at their top choices for albums back in the day, in the years that these albums came out, both of these albums were represented in like the top 10 for best Russian albums of those years. And so I think that holds up. I think that they still sound good, and it's just that they're difficult albums. So for the people who recommended the albums, that's great. I think both of these, like I said, Четыре позиции Bruno and Птицу Ем, these are both projects kind of involving the same people, so there is some overlap between them. But I guess, yeah, we're finishing up with some recommendations, and the final two are, I guess you could call them kind of classics from the more experimental days when experimental music, like effectively the pitchfork days of music in the Russian music scene. But yeah. All right. I'm going to close up Diane Arbus and this, and bam. We're going to transition back over to this. Yes, that is it. And this is probably, yeah, this is, I'm positive, the longest stream that I have ever done. So if you haven't, and you're still watching this, or you're watching this in the future, leave a like for my suffering. I'm going to have to finish this up quickly because it is after midnight. But we've got two of these left before the end of the year. And I kind of feel like next week, I was looking at what albums are supposed to release this Friday, tomorrow, or today technically, and it does feel like it's going to be a little bit, it feels like the release schedule is starting to slow down, which is what I expected. With that in mind, what I think I might do maybe for next week, or maybe for the actual final week of the year, is I will go back and try to hit some albums, because people are already putting out their best of the year list for Russian albums. So I'm gonna take a look at some albums that I may have missed over the course of the year, because there are some I know that people were quite energetic about and that I missed at the time. But as it is, well, I guess we'll get to that next week. As it is, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll be back next Thursday to do the penultimate, the penultimate music stream of 2025, and that'll be at 10 p.m. as usual. I don't think it's going to be so many. Да все хорошо, все хорошо. Все равно обычно не спим до часа. So I don't think it'll be so many albums next week, so it'll go a little bit faster. And yeah, anyway, so next week 10 p.m. for music, and then Sunday and Wednesday for news streams. I hope the news is slowing down too. I honestly have not looked at it today because I was taking care of all of the final bureaucratic nonsense that I needed to do outside of the house. Everything else, right, knock on wood, I do think I'm done with it now. So I'll take not reading the news today for getting that done and out of the way. But everyone have a good evening or a good afternoon, whatever the time of the day it is there. I do realize, no, I take that back. Next week is still the 20 or the 18th. So good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of the day it is. Take care of yourselves. I will see you when I see you. And until then, пока-пока.